What's up everybody, Gary Simon here, and today we've got a great one for you. We're going to be covering Adobe XD or Adobe Experience Design in Crash Course format. So you're going to learn how to use this application by creating this project right here that you can see for a fictional to-do kind of task app right here. And you can see that we're going to work in a lot of the different features and demonstrating the features of Adobe XD by actually creating what you see here, because I'm a big proponent of teaching by example. And we're not just going to talk about, UI design and prototyping. I'm also going to show you how to take a design, for instance, like this on desktop, and how to also quickly and easily translate it to make sure it works on mobile as well. All right, so also, I want you to make sure to go to DesignCourse.com. Enter your email to be notified when this course in this subscription service launches that I'm creating. It will be sometime this year in 2021. And the features that we're going to be talking about and showing for Adobe XD are going to be components, states, repeat grids, content-aware layouts, plugins and how to use them, auto-animate, scroll groups, and so much more. So as always, if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe and let's go ahead and get started. Now wait 1 second, you're about to watch me teach a UI design app, Adobe XD. And if you really like what you see and you want to learn more, check out my UI design bootcamp at the sponsor of this video at Scrimba.com.
At Scrimba, you don't just watch videos. No. You're actually able to modify code in the browser while you learn. My course on UI design features over 100 lessons that are specifically tailored to help you become an awesome UI designer, and they're packed with interactive challenges. So click the very first link here in the YouTube description to access my course along with many others for a very low monthly fee.
All right, so when you install Adobe XD and you load it up for the first time, you're gonna have a screen similar to this. This allows you to basically choose from a couple of different templates here to get started, or choose from your recent files. Obviously, you won't have anything recent if you're brand new. There's also some tabs over here about if you want to start learning. There's some certain, tutorials and stuff like that. But basically, this is where you get started in choosing what you want to work with. For us, I'm going to get started with a full desktop resolution to design for. That's how I like approaching UI design. Just designing the full experience and then working down smaller to like tablet size and mobile phone size. So we'll be going from a desktop, and then I'll show you how to take that desktop design and then translate it into a mobile app design as well. So we're going to click on that, and I'm going to go ahead and maximize this. A few things just for keyboard shortcuts when it comes to moving things around and navigating around your canvas here, your artboard. Just to move and pan, you just hold your space bar and then left click. If you want to zoom up, it's Alt and then use your scroll wheel. And then those are the main two ones that you're going to want to use basically for navigating around. You'll see me doing it quickly. And of course, this will all become muscle memory as you use it more often. All right, so just a real quick overview of the interface. It's very simple, the way it's structured, and it's very similar to other applications that like Figma, for instance. So up here over on the left side, we have our toolbar. All right, so we have just a select button. For instance, if we have like an object here, if we want to select it, we just choose our select button or hit the V shortcut, and then it allows you to select it. Not a big deal. Then we also have our rectangle tool, very simple, it makes squares, perfect squares and rectangles. We have an ellipse tool, perfect, ellipses that we can create, as well as, ovals. And then we have a polygon tool. It's not just for triangles though, but we can create many different sided polygons here. We have a line tool for creating lines, and we can make them 45-degree angles by holding Shift. We can make them flat or up and down, and then obviously without pressing any type of Shift key, you can create any type of angled line that you wish. We have our dreaded pen tool. The pen tool has always been a scary tool, dating back to Photoshop, because it's difficult for newbies or beginners to really follow along. But of course, you can create simple shapes. You can also create Bezier curves by left clicking and dragging and all that crazy stuff. We're not going to get too much into the pen tool though, for the purpose of this quick crash course really. We have the type tool. We'll be getting into this a lot. And then we have the artboard tool where you can see when you select it, this here is an artboard. So if you want to create a secondary artboard, you can do that here as well with the artboard tool. And there's the presets for different devices and such. And then we just have a magnifying glass tool, which, you know, if you use it, you can really scroll up by left clicking and dragging. Over here, we have this panel. There, you switch between 3 different panels essentially, where we have what are called libraries. And this is like where you store your document assets, such as your colors, your character styles, and components. We'll get into that a little bit. Also, we'll have our layers right here. You'll see how that all works. And then right here, we have a plugins panel that allows you to quickly use and access your plugins. And we'll be using a few plugins as well. Right here, of course, this is where we do all of our design. And up at the top, we have these tabs like design. We're currently in design mode. We're on prototype here. You could switch to prototype mode and you'll see how that works, because these are obviously 2 different things. And then you have a share tab over here that allows you to create different links that you can give to other people, other designers, other developers, or perhaps a client for them to review. And you have different options over here in terms of how it's presented based on who needs to see it. And then finally, this panel over here looks a little bit complex, but it's all based on what you have selected. So if I select like this artboard right here, we can see that it opens up some certain features, like we can change the width and height, we can make it a responsive resize layout, we can change a lot of stuff like the viewport height and the background color. This is where you change the background color here. In fact, I think we're going to change it right now to a very light gray. And the color code for that, it's a hex value, F2, F2, F2. And that's what we're going to use for our background color, just a very, very light gray. And that's basically it. That's all we're going to get into in terms of me describing the layout without having context. So I'm a big proponent and advocate of teaching by example. And so we'll cover all these tools and the properties as we start to design this layout, and we'll use them based on when we need to use them based on necessity. All right, so for the fictional project that we're going to build in order to demonstrate how to use Adobe XD, it's going to be just an idea that I came up with real quickly. It's not very original. It's going to be for a task app of some sort, like for completing tasks. You know, everybody and their mother does this. And we're going to call it Remember That. I don't have a logo. We're just going to have a simple word-based logo. And when you're designing for a website or an app, usually for the first thing that I consider, I start at the top. You know, what is going to be at the very top? And usually that's going to be the logo. That's going to be a navigation of some sort. In that bar up there, as a whole, it's called the nav bar usually. It can go by other different names as well. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take our nav bar and we're going to create a rectangle by just left clicking and dragging all the way out from the very left to the very right. And you'll notice when you get to certain areas, when you're moving your mouse, the mouse, it will sort of like snap to those areas, which helps you really make sure that when you draw out something like this, where you want it to go from the very left to the very right, it'll stay there and it'll make it easy for you. So you're going to see guides as well, which are these purple indicators at times, which make life a lot easier. So if we switch back to the select tool and we select on this, we can see that there is a stroke. Now, by default, currently, when it comes to Adobe XD and every update they've had, they always add a border. And so for this purpose, I don't want a border. We're going to take it off. And I'm going to choose, though, to have a colored background for the nav bar, which will contain the logo in the navigation. You don't always have to do that. In terms of UI design, you don't have to have a background. And I will toggle it on and off just to show you. And for a large part, it's pretty much a subjective preference. It's not objectively true that you always have to have a nav bar background like this. I'm just choosing to do it. All right, so let's go ahead, and another thing I want to show before we start actually putting the logo on, select the artboard by choosing the name. By the way, you can change the name by double clicking. We can call this our home page, because this is going to be a home page we're designing. If you come over here and under the properties panel and choose this right here, and you check on grid, you'll see we have like this overlay right here of these 12 different columns. You can control how many columns you want, but what is its purpose? Well, when it comes to designing layouts for the web, Usually there's a grid system that's used that the front-end developer uses in order to implement your design. And it makes life a lot easier, especially for the developer when they're trying to translate your design into workable code through HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And so we can toggle this on and off to make sure that we're creating a good, well-defined structure and a container for the elements that we place on the artboard. All right, so for me, I want to make sure that our logo starts just on this very first column. So I'm just going to left click there with the type tool just once, and then we're going to put remember that. And it's okay if these, if your elements extend beyond these columns. It's not a big deal. I think I will be doing a front-end development tutorial where we take this design and actually make it work as well. So look out for that tutorial if it's not already ready based on when you're watching this. So now we're going to go ahead and toggle off that grid layout. And here's our logo. It's not very good, is it, right? Well, it's not going to be because we didn't work on it. I like this font lately. I've been using called Poppins. And I'm going to change it to bold. All right, so if you don't have the Poppins font, you probably don't, then you want to come over here to Google and we're going to type in Poppins. 1 second, I'm on the other monitor. Let me drag it over. So if you type in Poppins in Google, you'll find this right here. It's fonts.google.com. You can download this font family and install it. If you do that, you'll open it up in your zip editor. You just take all these files, just push them onto a folder in your desktop, and then you double click on them and then you can install them. It's very easy. Hopefully you know how to install fonts, but if not, you can always use Google. All right, so now we're gonna go ahead and take the color. This is where you change your color for the text. So remember when I said when you select different things, the panel over here is gonna show different elements. So we have a white rectangle, and these are all the things that we can do with it. And then we have our text. Okay, well here we have text specific properties such as changing the typeface of the font, changing the weight, making it thin or bold or whatever, changing the size. We can just left click and drag up to change that or enter it numerically on the keyboard. So we could do all this stuff here. Alignment, justification, we can make them title case. If you ever want to undo, Control Z, of course. We can change the opacity here, which opacity is pretty much present on anything you select. Blend modes, we'll get into that in a little bit. But of course we can change the fill, give it a border if we want, a shadow, and all that good stuff. So for us, I'm going to change it just to black right here, and then I'm going to Alt and scroll in, or the scroll wheel to zoom up, and I'm going to take and double click into here, and I'm going to choose that, and then we're going to give it a primary color. So when it comes to UI design and your color scheme, you want to have a predefined set of colors that you use throughout the design. Some people only have 2 colors, some have 3, some have more. It all depends on your brand identity. So for us, we're going to use a primary color though, and we're going to be around blue. It's going to be like a bluish color, and we can just drag this around until we find a blue that we like. We can also drag this around where it controls the saturation, like a really vibrant color right here. And then we can desaturate it or this way. And then we could also choose to make it very light or very dark. All right, so it all depends on what color you want to use. I'm just going to use this color right here. The color code, if you want to follow along exactly, is 007AF3. You just enter it right here, hit enter, and it'll select it. I'm also going to hit plus here to save it as a color swatch, which means I don't have to use the eyedropper tool in the future. If I want to change another element to that color, I just click right here. All right, next up, now that we have our logo, that's all I'm going to say our logo is. It's a perfectly acceptable logo. It's very simple. But of course, this isn't a logo design tutorial. I don't want to spend time on that. Next up is going to be the navigation. There's a lot of ways to approach a navigation when it comes to a web design. Right here, one of the things, I'm not going to get too much into the theory of UI design because this is really an Adobe XD tutorial, but I am going to talk about this a little bit. When it comes to your navigations, one thing that you need to consider, do you have enough room to fit all of the links that you want that will redirect to your various pages? Because we're starting off on a desktop, we have all this room to put our links, right? Well, of course we do. I do see sometimes people use those little hamburger menu, the 3 little lines on desktop when they only have like 3 or 4 links. That does not make sense. Don't do that. We have all this space, so we're going to use it, and we're going to put a horizontal navigation here. So I'm going to choose to have 3 links right here. One's going to say home. And you should generally always have a home button. People expect it. It's a user experience thing. It's a usability thing. People want to be able to find a quick way to get back to your home. Usually I'll take the logo, I'll link that, and make sure if they click that, that'll go back to the home page. And then also have another home link as well on top of that. And so there's been usability studies on this. It's recommended that you should do it. Now, again, we're going to talk a little bit about UI design fundamentals here. I'm going to duplicate this by hitting Control D and then holding Shift and then left clicking and dragging out. When I hold Shift, it'll keep it on the same exact horizontal path. If I let go, it'll move it around. We don't want that. And so I'm going to hold Shift, left click, drag out, and then this will be the next link. Right now, you don't have to follow this part because we're going to restructure it, but I wanted to demonstrate something really quickly. So if you want to watch at this point, just go ahead. I'm going to change this one to features. We're going to hold Shift just the same way, and notice these guides. Now I know we have equal space between the links because it's telling us there's 72 pixels or so. And that's important for alignment and consistency in your layout, which is a UI design fundamental. Now looking at this, I'm going to zoom up a little bit here. Everything looks pretty decent, but you know, when it comes to UI design and we're talking about separating out your different elements visually, there's not much separation occurring here, visually speaking, from these 3 pieces of type and this, right? Yeah, these are basically spaced out a little bit, but they're all the same exact font size, they're the same weight, they're bold, and they're the same color pretty much. So we want to fix that. So there's multiple ways to do that, and it's going to look a lot better. In fact, again, you don't have to follow along. You can just watch. I'm going to duplicate all those, and we're going to see how much better the one I'm going to create looks when we establish what's called a proper visual hierarchy, which is another UI design fundamental. So what we're going to do is we're going to make these a little bit smaller, and by that I mean probably, well, first let's change the weight. One great way to separate and establish a visual hierarchy is by changing the weight of your type. So now, look at that. Your eye's kind of more drawn over here because it's big and bold, right? But at least these look different now. And that's we want it to look different because these are different things. This is a logo and then this is a navigation. We can leave it just like this, and I think it would be perfectly fine. You could also make them a little bit smaller in font size if you wished as well. Now, here's one thing. This is the reason I was telling you don't follow along, because I wanted to describe something that's going to save you a lot of time going forward. Let's say, for instance, you decide that you want to change this middle link to a different word, right? Maybe it has a different amount of characters. Let's say it's a FAQ page, like a frequently asked questions page. FAQ. What's the problem now? Well, the problem is we have all this space here between, and we have all this white space, as it's called. Sometimes it's called negative space, just the empty space between elements in your user interface. And then we have this amount right here. So if I were to draw out a little square between these two, we'll make this red, and put it here. Look, it's inconsistent. It doesn't look good. You want consistency. And so what you would have to do is just drag this back over. All right, it's not a lot of work, but it can be a lot of work if you're dealing with a different scenario where you have a lot of elements that need to be aligned properly, right? So we can fix this and make it so that they will automatically align themselves by using a feature in Adobe XD that will help us greatly. All right, so with our home button, what I want to do is I want to take a container that will wrap around it. All right, so we'll go back to our select tool. We're going to hide the border. We're going to go to our layers now. So we haven't talked about the layers yet. The layers, basically every shape that you, or every element that you put onto this canvas will show up here, all right? And they're all stacked in a certain order. So for instance, this rectangle 2 is this navbar background. By the way, it's a good idea to get in the habit of changing the name of your layer. So you double click into it. This could be like nav background. All right. So if we move it up by left clicking, dragging, notice it's on top. All right. So this is how layers work in most applications, starting with the old school Adobe Photoshop way back in the day. So what we want to do, we can't see our home button because any element that the last element you added is naturally going to be placed on top of it. So we're just going to push it right there underneath it. All right, so we can't see it because it's a white color, right? So we can change it just so we can see what it's looking like by changing the color here, like that. And what we want to do, and we are going to make a cool little interaction where when you hover the mouse over it, it will change to like a gray color like it is. What we want to do now is just take that and remove that. We're going to select both of those layers. And to do that, we're going to select just this home and then hold shift and then left click and select that. Now you can see these two layers are highlighted. You can also select them the same way up here in the layers panel. And what we want to do now is right click, and we're going to choose Make Component, or the shortcut is Control K. We're going to click that, and notice now it turns into this green outline. We select other things, it has this typical blue outline, or hover over, we see blue outline. This is now green because it is a component. So a component allows us to do something really cool. You can see right here that it has a padding option. So enable, disable padding. We want to click on that. Now when we click on it, it's going to add padding from the top, left, or right rather, bottom, and left. And then these values are pixel values, and if we adjust these, you'll see how it starts adjusting situations right here. Now you want these pretty much to be even for the most part. So this is top, this is bottom. Let's just change, let's change this one to 30. And then your values may be slightly different. This is 46, so let's just change that to, let's change this one to 46 as well. So now they're pretty much even, top, left, bottom, and right. Now what we can do is we can duplicate this with Control D, move it over, and remember, use your guides. You can see right there is where the edges meet because of that turquoise little line showed up vertically between them. And so now what we can do is I can double click into this and I can change this to features. And guess what? The space around it automatically expands, which is very helpful. So now, if I duplicate this, we can put it here, and we can name this one pricing, and there we go. All right. So I wanted to show another thing here that you can do with as far as creating little interesting micro interactions, as they're called. For instance, if we hover over one of these, we can make the background change, or we can make the font bold, or change the color of the font. You could do a lot of different things. So right up here, if we select on our home right here, you'll see it says the default state. Well, if we click on plus, we can add a hover state and then just hit enter. So now we have two different states, a default state and a hover state. Nothing changes when we select between these. So let's say, for instance, for the hover state, all we have to do is, if we want the background to change, we double click into it. So notice it's selected our rectangle 3, and we'll change the background color. Something very light gray. F1, F1, F1 is the color code. We'll hit enter. Now if we select it and we go back, we could see it maintained that change only for the hover state because that's the state that we had selected. And so now, if we go back to default state, and we're gonna hit this play icon, we haven't checked this out yet, but it basically allows you to preview your design, and it has any type of interactivity ready to go. So if we hover over, look at that. Isn't that cool? All right, so it doesn't do it for the, or actually it does do it for the other ones because we changed the main component instance but notice how it's doing this weird thing where it's changing it to home. So let me show you real quickly. When you have a component, you'll see this little green filled in area. If we select what are called like the instances of that component, it's not filled in green. See this right here? It's kind of just, there's a little dot of green in the middle. This one has a filled in green. So this is kind of an important thing to demonstrate. And we're gonna get back to fixing that issue with the home. Actually, we'll do it right now. On features, this instance of features, if we click on hovers, we could see it says home still, right? So we could change this back though by changing this to features. Let's go ahead and choose default state. And then also hover, this is gonna change to pricing. And so now both of these say default. All right, now those are gonna behave exactly as we want them to. So one important thing to understand, if you make a change on your main component, the component that you created first, it's going to make that change for your other, the instances of the component. That's one of the benefits of it. So let's say, for instance, we wanted this background to be like this blue color. We come in here, take that background, rectangle 3, and we'll make it blue. And guess what? All the other instances change to blue as well. And the utility of this may not be immediately evident, but when you're dealing with a design that has a lot of different, many different artboards and canvases that reusing the same elements, it makes your life so much easier when you could just change it in one area rather than having to change that area, that process or whatever you changed in many different areas of the design. So going back, one other thing I want to change though, one thing that makes sense for the purpose of usability, it's nice to have an indicator on which page the person's currently on. So we're designing a home page, so it makes sense to emphasize home, right? Of course it does. So what we can do is for default state on this instance, we can double click here so we could select our home text as a part of that main component, and we'll choose bold. Now that's gonna change all the other ones, but guess what? We can override them. So when we change properties in an instance of a component, it won't translate to any of the other ones. It'll just stay there on its own. So if we change this back to regular, and then change this back to regular as well, and make sure that everything else is where it should be, because now that also affected the change here on the hover state. So we go back here and we'll double click in. There we go. Now when somebody hovers over this, it's going to stay bold as it should, and now our little navigation should be ready to go. And it is. Awesome. Okay, so I know I've been talking a lot. We haven't got very far, but I definitely wanted to spend time on demonstrating a very integral feature of Adobe XD, and that's using components and knowing how to use them. So next up, let's say for instance, we're also going to have something over here. Now, many times people will simply opt to take their navigation and put it all the way to the right. And this is completely fine. If you want to do this and you only have a few links, that's what I would recommend doing, because instead of putting them here in the middle, it kind of doesn't fill out the whole layout, right? Because if we go back and we enable our grid, we have all this space. But sometimes you can have a navigation right here with a few links, but then have some other links that are different semantically that are situated right here to the right. So I'm going to do that. Actually, let's leave that on. We're gonna have two links here. So I'm gonna duplicate this and we're gonna have a contact. So a contact button is different than like a home, features, pricing. A contact is usually like of a lesser important element when we're talking about the areas that a visitor might want to immediately visit. Like they want to see the homepage, they want to see your features, they want to know how much it costs. contact might be secondary. That's why I'm splitting these up. Let's also put a call to action of some sort. Now, when it comes to UI design, you'll hear the term CTA, or it's an acronym for call to action. It's basically anything you want the visitor to do. If you want them to click something, that's a call to action. If you want them to scroll down, that's a call to action. If you want them to fill out a form, that's a call to action. If you want them to buy something, you get it. We're gonna put one that says go premium, like this is some sort of premium task service, right? So to do that, we're gonna style it differently because it is a call to action. We're not gonna make it like a simple just piece of type like this. So I'm going to first, we're gonna get the rectangle tool, and we're gonna start in the very left right there and drag out somewhere around there. And you can use your keyboard up and down keys as well as the right and left to situate things very easily if you need to make fine adjustments. We can also down here, we're gonna leave on a border this time, but take off the fill. And we're going to notice these little corners here. We haven't done this yet. So when you create a shape like a rectangle, you have these little corner circular things that we can grab a hold of. If you left click it, pull in, you can create rounded edges. And when you pull them all the way in, that creates what's called a pill shape container. So we're going to increase the size. Let's go ahead, by the way, and get rid of the grid view. Let's use our primary color for the stroke. And then inside of it, let's go ahead and put in a actual text link here. And this is going to be Go Premium. We also want to make it bold. All right, and let's see, like the size, maybe we could beef this up just a tad bit, pull these back in. And we'll make this blue as well, that blue color, the primary color. And this might be too wide, so we can drag this in over here. Now we can select both and do what we did before. You know, you left click, shift, left click to select both of those elements that we just created. And then we can right click and create a component and then choose padding once again. And they're pretty much even for the most part. This is 27 here. Let's just do 24 and 9 and 9. Okay. So now we can change this type and the width of that container will change. So see, whatever. All right. So let's go back to Go Premium. All right, and that is our navigation. Let me real quickly check the grid just to see if that's, yeah, we want to make sure that this is situated exactly where it needs to be. And there we go. That is the navigation. Very, very, very simple. All right, so next up is what's commonly referred to as the hero section. So on a website, on your homepage, or the landing page as it's called sometimes, you'll have what's called the hero section, which is generally found underneath your nav bar. And this is where really important pieces of type go. This is where you're trying to grab the person's attention and you're trying to answer a question that they might have in their head, which is, what is this site about? All right, so you have to really choose your headline. You might have a sub-headline of text, a call to action, like a real strong call to action, and maybe some accompanying graphic of some sort. That's a very typical pattern for creating a landing page. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take, and by the way, we could turn on our grid here. We're gonna take the type tool, and I wanna show you something very important about the type tool here. If I simply left click once, and I make a headline, a task app that doesn't stink. All right, and we increase the size by left clicking and dragging up here. Let's say, for instance, we wanted to have 2 columns. So we hit enter after, right before the D and doesn't. All right, so that works, but a better way, if you have to have text that wraps like that, is to left click and drag before you create that layer, that text layer, and you could drag out to wherever you want it to wrap. So now when we left click and release a task app that doesn't, let's do this, app that, there we go, doesn't stink. And it does it for us automatically, so it's a time saver. All right, so we could choose to put this text right here aligned right here on this same column. We can indent it here, another column, or we can go here even further. It all depends on how your design is structured and what makes sense. And sometimes your immediate thought process of putting it here on this third column, that will change in the future. It all depends, it's okay. That's why we use design programs to first create a design of what we want a website to look like, rather than just hopping right into HTML and CSS and code. Very important lesson. A lot of people ask me that. Why do we have to design it when we're just gonna start over with HTML and CSS? And I was like, this is the reason why, because it's so quick and easy to iterate and to change your design. All right, so right here, we could choose to use this blue, but for me, I'm gonna make it black. It's a high contrast, and people will see it because we have pretty large type here. But most importantly, we're gonna use our primary color for our primary call to action button, and that's gonna really stand out, because that's the thing that we want people to click. So a task app that doesn't stink. Okay, so we have some other options here, like we could change the letter spacing by, changing this value. We can change the line height right here by changing this. And what we're gonna do for this particular element is change the line height. Like right there, I think that's pretty good. You make sure, you make sure that your app or your type is very easy to read. Now, I'm gonna create another type layer. I'm gonna hit Control D to duplicate it. Hold Shift and just move it up to like right around here. And I'm going to double click into it and then hit Control A to select all. And I'm gonna put in a subheadline. It's nitty and gritty. It's a very silly title here. And this is gonna be like a subheadline. Now, why does this not look good? Well, it's because they're styled exactly the same. So we have to reinforce what's called the visual hierarchy. And so when we do that, we can do it in multiple ways. So we're gonna do this primarily through scale, but we're gonna change some other things about this. We're gonna make it really different, but it's gonna look a lot better than this. And in fact, I'm gonna duplicate this off to the side and we'll compare them afterwards. So first, scales have to come down a lot. So we're gonna take the scale, down to like 26, and we're gonna hold Shift and put that maybe right around there. Now that's already looking better. I mean, if we compare these two, this is so much better looking, but we can still make it different. We can also change the color. So the color, we have many options. We can make it blue. Now that even looks better than the previous version where this was just black. We can make it gray so that it doesn't have as much contrast, but it still has enough to the point at which it's readable. You don't want to do stuff like this. It's too hard to see. So we want to come up here. If you're gonna have text, it's worth people being able to read it, unless it's like a big watermark in the background, as it's called. Now, we could also change this up further. If we select this, we can change, well, you could select this option here for uppercase. All right, so now they're all uppercase. And we can also extend the letter spacing by dragging this up. Now, I think I even might want to make it a little bit smaller. And there we go. Look how much vastly different this looks compared to this. This is hard to read. You're not really sure, like they're two separate sentences and it just does not look good. So get in the habit of really reinforcing your visual hierarchy by placing emphasis and priority onto your elements, and doing so in a way that makes sense. When I say priority, this right here, a task app that doesn't stink, this is your main headline. It's so much more important than the subheadline text. It's nitty and gritty, right? I mean, so think about it like that. And the way we reinforce this visual hierarchy is through your other UI design fundamentals, such as typography, scale, font weight, the alignment, the white space between them, all that stuff. All right, enough on the UI design fundamental stuff. Right here, we could choose to have another like maybe a couple not a couple paragraphs, but a couple sentences. You could do that. if you wanted to. For me, I'm just gonna have a big call to action like right here. And it's gonna be styled pretty similar to this one, but it's gonna be filled in with all blue with white text so that it really stands out. So we're gonna take our rectangle, drag those in to create the pill container, get rid of the fill, give it this color right here. By the way, I want to show you something. Let's go back here to the libraries, and if we take this, we have this blue rectangle selected. Let's choose this plus right there under colors. That's going to make it so that if we want to right click and edit, or before we edit it, if we choose right click and highlight on canvas, it's going to highlight every element that uses that color. But watch what doing this really, how it's really powerful. If we right click and choose edit, and we choose in the future, or your client asks you, or your employer asks you, what if we change this blue to something else? It's going to be so much easier to do it here, because guess what? They're going to change everywhere. Look at that. So when you're dealing with a large project that has hundreds of layers and tons of artboards, working intelligently really will pay off because it's going to save you time. All right, so let's continue on. We're going to take the type tool, and for this call to action, it's just going to say try for free. All right, can't see it because it's gray. I'm going to make it white. Let's get rid of that letter spacing. That doesn't look good here in this context. Let's increase the size, try for free, roughly right around there. And we'll move this right here. Now we'll take both of them. Now you should know the drill at this point. Take both, make sure we have both selected for the layers. Right click, make component and padding. That way if we want to change the anchor text here, we're not going to have to worry about changing the width of the button behind it because it automatically changes. Next up, let's have, sometimes when it comes to a call to action, you may have what's called a secondary call to action, where you have just a second button that doesn't stand out quite as much, but it could be a link or to a page or a video that somebody really wants to see, that really makes sense. So we're going to have, instead of, and by the way, I've seen people do this. They'll have two call to actions, like watch a video. Oops, let me fix that spelling. Watch a video. This is wrong. Why is it wrong? Because you don't want two call to actions that are styled exactly the same. There should always be a primary objective when it comes to your site or your client's site. What is it that, what is the target? What is the objective that you value the most? There's always going to be one that you want them to take the most. So it doesn't make sense to have a call to action or two call to actions that are styled exactly the same. It's a visual hierarchy issue again. So the one that's more important will generate the most interest of the eyeball, essentially. So we're going to make this one less important. So to do that, I'm just going to take the type tool, and I'm going to put watch a video. All right, we're going to put this here. Now, if I change this to black, all right, this is definitely less important. But you know what? It's a little bit, it's competing for too much attention of the eye based on this headline right next to it. Yeah, it's smaller, but it's still competing too much. We need to separate it more. So let's make it smaller. And you know what? We don't even need to make it bold. Let's just go to regular. Now, to make it evident that it's a link that somebody can click, we can underline it by clicking the underline button here. Now, this is a lot better than what we had, right? Let's also put an icon. Now, so this is going to be the first time I introduce you to plugins in Adobe XD. If we come up here to the hamburger menu, we'll see we have plugins. Now, I already have a bunch of plugins installed. If you're new to this, you probably have none. In which case, you want to go to Browse Plugins. So when we click Browse right here and we search, you could type in something like icon, and you're going to get a bunch of different plugins like Icon Drop by Icon Scout. There's a ton that you can, choose from. If I go back here, the one that I'm going to use is icons. No, that's not the one I'm going to use. I'm sorry, I lied. It's called Icons for Design. If you just put in the icon name, or if you just try to search for one, you're going to find a list of icons, chances are at least. I want a video. So if I just type video, you're going to get all these different icons that you can use that demonstrate video. You could use a video camera. I'm going to left click just left click it rather. And when you left click it, it'll just drop it right in for you. So now we have a nice little icon that accompanies this text right here. Now, I think we could, I also kind of want to make this a little bit less contrast. So it's like a darker gray. It's all fours here, 6 fours. And that looks pretty good right here. Now, of course, we're missing context because it's not a completed design. We need something over here. What goes over here, or what could go over here? Many different things. An illustration of some sort could go there. And that's what I'm going to do. So to demonstrate a few other features of Adobe XD, let's go ahead and create some sort of like little illustration over here. So the first thing I'm going to do is take the this tool right here, the rectangle tool, and let's go back to our layers, by the way, and let's get rid of the border, and let's make it a rounded, and maybe this is going to be illustration, like a rough skeleton UI based illustration of like a task app. All right. And that's going to allow me to show you a couple of really cool things called the repeat grid and also stacks. So let's go ahead and create like a little checkbox situation, like icon. So I'm going to take the ellipse tool. I'm going to hold Shift and Alt while left clicking and dragging. That's going to make sure that wherever I click, it's going to expand from that center point, and also using Shift, it'll allow me to make sure it's a perfect circle. So we're going to take off the annoying border that's always added, and this time let's use a different color. Maybe we're not going to use blue. We could use blue, but I see blue all over now. We can introduce a secondary color, maybe like green. That's really bright, kind of hurts my eyes, so we can just drop this over here. And we could just experiment with the shade of green. Yeah, I think right there is good. That's 1FC4 1F. We're going to add it to the swatches by clicking plus. And then we're going to come in here and we're going to take the pen tool. I'm going to left click like right around here, hold Shift, left click, keep on holding Shift, and then left click finally, hit escape. Now we can change the border, make it bold, and make it white so that it really contrasts well. Oops, I did not mean to do that. There we go. So now we can center it up there. All right, so now we have this little checkbox thing. Now let's go ahead and create what's called kind of like a skeleton UI. So this is kind of like emulating a list of items that are checked off. So I'm going to drag out here, roughly this size. We're going to make them pill-shaped. We're going to get rid of the border. And this time we're going to use like a pastel sort of color. So let's come to like purplish. Pastels will be like around here in the color selector, just to give some more color to this UI. Yeah, right there is good. I'm going to duplicate this, Control D, hold Shift, drag down. Now let's change the width of this. Come down a little bit more with our key. We'll duplicate this. Maybe we'll have a couple circles to emulate, like, I don't know, icons or something in this little fictional UI. And there we go. All right, so now, what if we wanted to have like 3 of those total? Do we sit there and recreate all 3 of them? No. By the way, this is a little bit large. I'm gonna select both, hold Shift, Alt, scale down. There we go. So we want to. It would be very dumb to recreate all that by hand like we just did, right? So Adobe XD will give you several different ways to tackle this. So level newbie would be to recreate all of that stuff that we did and try to do it 3 times. One step up from that would be to take all those. Notice how we selected the background. We could hold Shift deselect as well. We could take these, we could hit Control D, we could duplicate it, Control D, duplicate it as well. And then we have our 3, right? Well, that's better than trying to recreate them from scratch, right? But it's still not as intelligent of what we could do. With all of them still selected, we can hit Repeat Grid. And now notice we have these little anchors, these little handles, and it changed to a dashed green. If we pull down, guess what? Look at that. And then also if we change one thing, it'll change among all the other rest of them. Look at that. Very, very cool stuff, very powerful. And we can also even take this and pull it this way and create, you know, a bunch of columns in rows that repeat whatever we started with. So that's very, very handy. You can also ungroup the grid when you're done. So now it just kind of keeps them in their own groups. But if you make a change to one of them, they will no longer change to the rest of them. So it's just something very important to remember. Now, let's say, for instance, we want to change the color of this, like this middle row, the second row, to like a greenish pastel, and maybe this one to like an orange one. Well, in order to do that, we're going to ungroup the grid. Then we're going to go ahead and when you ungroup the grid, it automatically creates groups out of whatever you replicated. So you can double click into that to select into that group. So that's very important to understand. So let's change these colors. In fact, we can hold Shift and select all of them, and we can change all of them at once. And so let's change this one to like an orangish maybe. Yeah, right around there is okay. Color code for that is F9D5A5. And then we'll do the same thing real quickly here and just create another color. This one, well, I think maybe we'll use like a greenish. Yeah, that's fine right there. All right, now we're looking good. Okay, so now, let's say for instance, you know, this was a list and we wanted to be able, maybe the client or yourself or your boss or whatever says, I want this green one on top for whatever reason. And this could be applicable to so many different use cases when it comes to lists and stuff. Well, you can go like this and then realign them like that, right? Yes, you could. But one way that even makes it easier, let's select all these. We're going to right click and make a component. Now, remember we saw this, we've used this padding option, but we haven't used the stack option yet. Let's click that. So we've now created a stack and we have these 2 buttons. This is a vertical stack. It will know automatically, it will try to guess based on the type of list that you have or the type of elements and how they're structured to situate it as a vertical stack or a horizontal stack. So for us now, watch what happens if I want to move this one to the top. We double click into it and watch this. They all move automatically. So you don't have to do that extra work. Very helpful to understand how to use these stacks right here. Very, very helpful. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna say that's pretty much the design. Maybe one thing we wanna change here though is we'll double click into here. Maybe this won't be green. Maybe this one will be, let's make it white. And then we'll take this element here and we'll make that one, actually, no, it's not even gonna have a check mark box. Maybe we'll give this a little bit of a border and then we'll make it kind of like a light border, like a light gray. So it's 4. Let's add this to our swatches and we can quickly just replicate that for this one. Oh wait, it doesn't have a fill. This is 4. There we go. It does have a fill, it's just white. There we go. All right, now we're good. So I kind of like that better. We could just leave it exactly like this, the whole thing. Let's get it like kind of situated in a way that makes sense right here. I want to show you another thing. If we select on most of our elements here, you're going to have the option to apply a shadow. Shadows are really cool. A lot of people get them wrong in terms of UI design, but let me just show you one thing we can do. We can increase the blur. We could take the Y down, so we could push it down real far, push it left or right. Very cool. Just try to go easy on your shadows. Like, you change the opacity. A lot of people do something like this. It's just, you don't want to see that. If you're gonna use shadows, try to make them very understated, very low opacity. And this is fine. We could also have not used a shadow at all. At this point, it's kind of like a subjective preference. All right, so we're gonna say that that is our hero section, and this may be the only thing that a person sees with what's called above the fold when they look at the app. All right, we're going to create more design though, because obviously this is pretty understated, and obviously I also want to show you a lot more of what Adobe XD can do. So right here, you see this dash? This dash right here has to do with this value right here in the viewport height. So if you select this, you know, the canvas here, you'll see that we have this viewport height. If we change this value up and down, watch what happens. So if we make it like this and we hit play, that's what that's controlling. It's basically what the user sees by default without having to scroll. Now we can scroll down here by using our mouse scroll wheel. Now for me, when I'm designing initially, I like to just make this all the way, I take this all the way at the very bottom, just so I don't see it. So maybe this area will list out all the different not tasks, but features that are associated with our app. So there's a lot of ways to do this. Generally speaking, when you have different containers or different areas of your layout that semantically they're talking about different things, like there could be testimonials in one area, there could be contact form in another area. You want to separate them out visually, like with the background color. Not always, but we're going to do that here, and it just helps make sense based on what's happening throughout the different portions of your layout. So I'm going to take the rectangle tool, drag out just a container like this. We may end up resizing it and all that. And we're gonna choose a background color for this. We could go many different colors, or not many, but we have a lot of options, and a lot of them would be subjective, I would say. Like, we could go white. We could see clearly there's a big difference between this gray and this white. We could go blue. You could do that. I want to do something different though. I'm going to take the same hue of blue that we have here. So we're not going to move the hue over here, but we're going to move this and make it darker. Yeah, maybe right around there. Desaturated and dark. Still has blue in it, and it's in the same hue. So these two, they align with each other. They work well. But it's obviously, it's a high contrast from this right here. Sometimes just to be different and to break outside of the container or out of the box, so to speak, I'll put some design elements. Like for instance, we're just gonna drag out a rectangle, and maybe we'll use our primary blue color here. Maybe on this desktop version, it doesn't really serve any type of importance outside of just being, an interesting design element. Another thing you'll see when it comes to like these graphic designs that you'll see in UI designs we're going to take the repeat grid. Maybe we'll have a row of 5, and then maybe 4 rows. And you'll see something like this. And it's just a sort of like there's a lot of different variations of this, or different types of elements that you can add, but they're there just for graphic design elements, just to add interest to a layout. They're not important. They're not like, they shouldn't be primary elements, but they're there just to supplement the design. All right, so we'll leave that over here. And now we're going to list out the features. And so if we bring back our grid, I think it would make a lot of sense to keep our important stuff on this second column right here, at least for this container of information that we see. So I'm going to put, we're going to take this little checkbox. I'm going to double click a few times to get into it to select both of those layers. Control C, and then we're going to come over here and Control V. It'll put it on the same location as last time, but we're just going to take the duplicate and push it over here. And we're going to make it a lot smaller. Now, when you make it smaller, your strokes remain the same size, so you may have to scale down the size of the stroke. So now let's toggle off the grid. All right, and now we're going to start putting in some of the features. And of course, these are all fictional, so I'm just making them up. So with the type tool, unlimited tasks. Okay. And we're gonna make it white so that it contrasts really well. Unlimited tasks. Now what is the size? 21. For us, I think we're gonna go a tad bit larger. So we'll bump this up to 25. All right, so our app has unlimited tasks, right? All right. Now we can list some more of these. So we're just gonna take all those, repeat the grid, and then maybe we'll have this amount. Now at this point, I'm just going to take this one, SMS task reminders. Now notice how it's cutting these off. We'll fix that, don't worry. Confetti explosions upon task completions. Really exciting stuff, right? Social media announcements, whatever that means. Finally, we'll also put real time, if I can spell, collaboration. I mean, I don't even know what that means. Other awesome features, okay. So now if we select this and we pull this all the way out, we'll see that they're overlapping. We push this just right here. We could have, you know, 2 columns if we had a lot of features, but we don't. So I'm just gonna pull this back. We're also going to structure this, like how much space do we want in between each one of these. You don't want too close. That becomes a little bit hard to read and just doesn't look good. You don't want too much. That's a little bit too spread out. So there's a middle ground somewhere, probably right around here. And that looks pretty good. So once we have that, we can just leave this here to maintain the fact that this is a repeatable grid. You can ungroup it, and then in which case you don't have that grid features or the functionality anymore. But I'm gonna leave it as a grid. Now, we have some empty space here. Like, what are we gonna do about this area? Well, we could kind of take the same idea and just put it over here, right? This is where it pays to be a little bit artsy and you know, understand graphic design a little bit. So maybe we'll make a block right here. And this time, we are going to put in an image, a photograph of some sort. So that's going to lead us to another plugin called Photosplash. All right, so I'm going to enter a keyword here. So by the way, if you want to install it, go to the plugin section and go to manage plugins, then search for it, click install, and then you'll have access to it. We'll just type in using phone, find photos. And so now we can have all these photos at our disposal from which, you know, we see people using their phone. Let's just choose this one. And there we go. Now, there's something called blend modes, which we haven't talked about yet. And blend modes aren't new to Adobe XD. Blend modes have been around since Photoshop. So if we take a blend mode and we just select one, but we use our keyboard down arrow key, we can start going through them. Notice multiply, color burn, and all of them do something a little bit different than the other ones. I'm gonna choose, if we go all the way down, to luminosity. It doesn't really work too well with this background because it's almost seamless. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna duplicate this photograph layer, and now we have one on top of the other. We have rectangle 13 and 14. Here I was telling everybody to name their layers and I'm not doing it. We're gonna take the original one, the background. And if I hide, by the way, if you hover over these, you can lock the layers and hide them. If I hide the top one, if I just toggle this on and off, or change it rather, we can see it changes, and the reason it's gray is because of our luminosity. We have to go back to normal. We're going to choose this same exact color. Now, this is important. We're going to bring back this, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to select both of those layers, pull them down to create the similar effect right here. How this was kind of extending outside of the container. This is going to come from the bottom and extend from the bottom of the container. All right. Now, notice how I said I wasn't happy. There's not a lot of separation with this particular photograph. If we double click into this, we can actually change what is shown in that area. So if we want it like that, we could do that. Now it looks like it's an actual, you know, contained image that's not seamless with this background up here. All right, and of course you could always do other different things. Like if we took that background layer, we changed the color to like this, it's gonna change this over here because this has that luminosity. And you could always change, you know, experiment with the other ones as well. I think we're just gonna stick with that one. All right, so far, so good. We've really learned a ton. I mean, just learning what you've learned so far, you can get pretty far. Let's keep on designing though, because I wanted to show you some other features here that we will get to. All right, so let's take this background, Control D to duplicate it, and we'll pull it here. Now this is gonna be a different area, section of the landing page where we show testimonials, which is a common thing that you'll see in many landing pages. Let's take the background primary color this time. All right, so let's create what are called cards. So in UI design, Google Material made it real popular, what are called cards, which is just kind of like rectangular pieces of content, essentially. And that's what we're gonna contain each of these testimonials in that you're gonna see. So let's bring back a grid, and let's place a card right here. And it'll span maybe around 3. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. And then we'll also, let's go ahead and toggle that grid off. We'll also make the edges round. All right. And instead of making this white, which we could leave it white, it contrasts well, we could use the same background color with the color picker, and we could take and just make it a little bit darker. You could do this as well. All right, so let's put in a circle. So from the center, notice how what I did. I waited for these guides to show up at the right point in time. So we know it's centered vertically and horizontally because we see the vertical and horizontal alignments. And Shift and Alt, that way we can create a circle right there on the top in the middle. Now we're going to use that same plugin, Photo Splash, and we're just going to type in person, and we'll use her. You can use whatever, you don't have to use the same one. You can always, you know, scale this and move it around when you double click into it. All right, so that's our person with our fictional, our first little card design. We're gonna give this a border as well. And let's try making it white. That works fine. By the way, when it comes to these borders, you have the ability to put it on the outside. Or we could try using the same background color, which you can't really tell it that much. We could make it thicker. You could do that, which, again, I think it's subjective. If you want to make it white, you can make it white, or just leave it the same background color, or make it this color right here. You could do that as well. In the end, I think I'm just going to leave it here. Now let's put in the actual text quote. So I'm left-clicking, dragging out, and I'm going to show you another very handy plugin in a second. So we're going to drag this down. We're going to go over here. We're going to go to Lorem Ipsum. All right, and so for Lorem Ipsum, If you don't know what that is, it's just Latin text for placeholder text. So you don't have to sit there and figure out all the ad copy while you're designing. So I'm just going to choose this, quick lorem ipsum. Now the problem with this right here is we had a lot of letter height, or line height rather. So we're going to decrease that, and then I'll go back to that same plugin and do the same thing. There we go. All right, so I think it's a little bit large, this text, and it's also too close to the edges of this. So we can Alt and scroll and push that in. All right. And let's put a little quote before and after. Make sure this is all centered up pretty good. And we'll center it as well. Center align the text. And then we'll duplicate that, and then we'll put a person's name, Jane Doe. We will bold it right here. And we'll maybe, just to reinforce that visual hierarchy, we'll go ahead and take the opacity down just a tad bit. Like that. All right. So that's pretty decent. Again, I'm not sure if I want white. I think that's a little bit too much. Yeah, we'll just stick with that. All right, so now that we have that, you know, again, we could take these three, or these four layers. We have the avatar, we have the description, or the quote, and the person's name in the background. We can right click and choose to make it a component, and then stack them. It's a vertical stack. So now, you know, if for some reason I want to put this at the bottom, we could do that and all that good stuff. All right, so now we can also take repeat grid. And we're gonna repeat this pretty far out, like right here. Let's make it start maybe like right here, and then repeat it out all the way that far. Now the reason I'm doing that is because when we select this, if we choose this option right here, this little icon, scroll groups, we're going to create a horizontal scroll group, because you can see the two little icons are pointing to the left and right. You can also do vertical, and one that does horizontal and vertical. We'll do one of those in a second here. This one's just going to be horizontal. When we click it, then we can kind of choose on the left and right what will be the visible portion of this scroll group. So let me show you what a scroll group actually is. So if we go back here, now if we hit play, we're going to see the whole thing. Because our viewport height is real high. Again, if we change this to 1080, hit play, now we just see the 1080 portion, and we can scroll down. Now watch this. Here's where the fancy stuff comes in. If we left click, oh no, it's not working. You're supposed to be able to left click that, and it will show you. Let's see what's happening. Maybe I will ungroup. Is that a scroll group? I want to make sure this is working correctly. I thought I chose a scroll group. There we go. Now we hit play. It's going to work this time. Trust me. Now look at that. So now we can actually create a carousel, so to speak, where we define what is initially visible, and then anything that extends outside, we'll be able to left click and drag and sort through all of them. Very, very cool stuff. All right. Now we could leave it like this if we wanted to. I'm going to show you another cool thing though that you could do optionally, because we haven't talked about gradients. Let's take a rectangle tool, roughly right around there. Get rid of the stroke. We'll make the background color this, but we're going to click on this and change from solid color to linear gradient. So what we can do is we can create these gradients, and we can change the color of each of these different gradient stops. We can also reposition the gradient. So if we want a gradient that faces this way, we could push that right there. And the darker one, let's make our original color right here. And then we'll choose this one right here and take the opacity slider all the way down. So what that does is it creates an effect where it kind of fades off these areas right here. So now I can duplicate this, hit Alt, and then just flip it so it goes to the reverse side, and then push it over here. We'll have to take this, right click, we can choose arrange and bring to front so that it is not on top. Although its blend mode is screwing it up. So let me resort these a little bit. Let's take our scroll group right here, as well as these two, and let's put them underneath wherever this shows up. Let's see here. Oh, we also want to take this background right there. There we go. Now it's working properly, and we don't have it overlapping. So now if we hit play, look at that. Look how cool that is. Awesome. All right, and so let's go ahead and do one more section of this, this design right here, and then we'll get into prototyping and animation, all that cool stuff. Let's go ahead, let me think here. That was a scroll group. Let me undo that. There we go. Okay, so now we can move this up. We can select both of those elements holding shift and move those up as well. We just want them in like a good amount of white space on the top and even amount as well as the bottom. We can also take this and move it up slightly with our keyboard arrows. And if you wanted to, you can go in and select each one of these individually and change the pictures. But I'm not going to do that. So now, in this next section, let's have like a contact area with a map. And excuse me, I just started recording right now this morning, an hour after waking up, and everything you saw prior to this moment, I recorded yesterday. So if my hair's different and I look different, my eyes are puffy, that's why. So getting back to what I was saying, we're going to create a contact section down here, kind of like a 2-column 50-50 sort of deal, where on the right we're going to have a scroll group where you can scroll on the X and Y axis with like a Google map, and then on the left we'll have like a contact form where we'll use both components and stacks. All right, so first thing I want to do is take our artboard. We'll go ahead and give ourselves a little bit more room to work with, not too much, and we're going to get create a 50-50 column. So we'll take the rectangle tool, and when we hover over here, we'll see it lets us know where the exact center of the artboard is. Once we have that, we're going to left click and drag out an area. It's probably not going to be that long, actually, probably right around here. And this is going to allow us to put in a photograph of some sort, like a Google Maps view. So all I'm going to do is, if I come out here, we'll go to maps.google.com. Did I just type goggle? There we go. And I type in some, address like 90210 Beverly Hills, California. All right, so here's Beverly Hills, California. And all I want to do is, I use this screenshot tool. I hit my print screen key. You're not going to be able to see it while I do it. But I'm just going to get and save an image of what I screenshotted. I'm going to call it maps2. So I just saved the screenshot. You can see it's maps2.jpg right there. And so I unmaximized the screen so that I could just see my desktop, and then just with this selected, I will left click and drag it in. All right, very, very cool. So now we have this fictional location for our business. And let's say, for instance, we want to be able to make it so that people can zoom around in it or move it around in an XY axis by grabbing it or whatever. So if I double click into it, you'll see we have the ability to, make it larger if we wish or whatever. So I'm just make it a little bit larger. I'm going to take this, and then we're going to click on this, the horizontal and vertical scroll option. So if we extend this back out a little bit, and then we go ahead and click play, we'll scroll down. Oh, it's not working, and I think because if I double click into it, we need to make sure it's larger. So it didn't maintain the first time I did that, but let's go ahead and click play, and it will work now. So There we go. All right, very cool. So in the left section, we'll just have an accompanying area that has where it says contact me. So let's go, or contact us rather. Let's get our grid back out. This time, because we have, you know, a pretty large area in this portion, we're gonna put a piece of text right here on the first column, and it'll just say contact. Make sure this is left justified. Make this black, and we will go ahead and hide that grid. All right, so now we just need to make this larger. Contact us, or contact, whatever you want to call it. So right here, there's a lot of different ways to put a contact form information. We're gonna just do like a form field, just with 2 fields. So the first field is gonna be name. We'll make that smaller. We can also make it, in order to reinforce that visual hierarchy, regular. We'll take the rectangle tool, and somewhere around there will work. Now, let's go ahead and give us a slight border radius, not like a full pill. I mean, you could do this. You could do this very slightly. Now, when it comes to borders and strokes on your form elements, it's very important that they're visible. For instance, if we took this off, this may not be visible to some people with vision impairment issues. So we can definitely leave a stroke, but it doesn't really have to be this dark. So we just take the color, drop it down maybe around there. You can also make it thicker if you wished, but I'm just gonna leave it right there. And then we'll take name, we'll take both of those rather. And oh, by the way, this would be a good use case, you know, because form elements like, you know, text fields and all that are elements that are reused commonly in different parts of an app, like a login screen, like this might have a login screen or whatever. So anything that's reused, of course, is a very good use case for components. So if I right click, you choose make component, it's now a component. It will show up inside of our component section. This would be a very good idea at this point to go ahead and, like if I click this here, make sure that's the right one. To rename it, just call it text field and rename all these appropriately as well. And now we have the ability to edit the main component and all that stuff. What we're gonna do here is simply, we'll group this up. So to create a group manually, you just hit Control G or right click and make group. You can see it's called group 13. We'll just call this text element or form element. And then we'll go ahead and duplicate this. So Control D. Let's go ahead and name this one. This will be like the message. And this will be like a text area. So we can just double click and drag it down so they have a little bit more space to type. All right. And then we'll have an actual button. So if we go back to our assets, we have a button component right here. You see where it says try for free. We can edit the instance text, of course, send message. But I think this is a pretty big button. So we could just double click and select on the text layer, drop this down in size, and once we make that change, everything will fall in automatically due to the automatic padding that's applied. So that's looking pretty solid. And there we go. So we can also, as I mentioned, utilize stacks here if you wish, just to show you again. It's good to get muscle memory. In this case, it's probably not so important because we can move things easily around. And plus, it wouldn't make sense necessarily to use stacks here. If we right click, make component, and then choose stacks, then we have the option to double click into here, move things around if we wish, but it would not make sense to put the message at top. But again, it's a good idea just to get in habit of knowing how to do this stuff. So that, I'm gonna say, is it for the homepage design. Of course, you could add a footer if you wish, and that would be a good exercise if you wanted to. But we're not done yet because I haven't showed you any of the prototyping and animation features. So again, here's a final look at what we have going on. Pretty solid. All right. Okay, so now at this point, let's say you're happy with it. You want to save this document, all right? So Control S to save, and if you're doing it for the first time, you have the option to save it locally on your hard drive or in the cloud. You'll see those options. Now, let's say, for instance, we want to design a page that shows what happens when somebody clicks on the Watch a Video button. All right, there's many approaches that work with this. A common approach is you click on Watch a Video, and instead of redirecting you off the entire page, a little window or a modal kind of shows up, and it dims out everything behind it. So we're going to take that approach. And we're going to create a couple artboards to create a multi-step animation for that using what's called auto-animate. So first thing we'll do is we'll duplicate this artboard. So you select the artboard, hit Control D, it'll just place it right to the side. So now we can just call this video player or something like that. And what I'm going to do at this point is we're going to delete everything beneath here. Actually, no, we're not. I lied. We're going to delete everything right around here, all right? And then this stuff, what we'll do is we're going to push it down. So basically I've selected everything like this, just left clicking and dragging. We're gonna hit Shift and then left click and drag down just outside of this viewport dashed line right here. Then, with it still selected, we're going to take the opacity and drop it all the way off. Then, and you'll see why I'm doing this in a second, I'll explain. We're going to take all this stuff in the left column. We're going to hold Shift and just move it over a little bit, and then also hide it. And then we're going to do the same thing with this element here. Move it over to the right, and then hide it as well. So let me show you why I did that. So we're going to take our home canvas here, our artboard. We're going to go to prototype, and when somebody clicks on this icon right here, or not icon, but the piece of text that says Watch a Video, we're going to drag, left click and drag over to this artboard. So when we do that, we can see that it's created this little connection. And over here for interaction in the properties inspector in the panel, we see it says a trigger is tap. That means to click on it or whatever. You can see there's also different types of triggers like a drag trigger, keys and gamepad, and voice even. Then underneath it we have action. We have a type of transition. We have auto-animate, overlay, scroll to, previous artboard, audio playback, and speech playback. So these are all things that you can experiment with it on your own. I'm going to show you what happens when we just do a simple transition. When it comes to the transition, you'll see we have the option to preserve the scroll position, like wherever they're scrolled at and viewed, based on the viewport and all that stuff. Animation type, we can make it slide left, right, up, down, push left, push up, right, down. There's a easings, which affect how the animation is applied, and then also a duration. So let's go ahead and hit play. And if we click this, it's just going to fade all that out. Now, if we change this to the animation type to auto-animate, you'll see the options change a little bit. Actually, we have fewer options, but watch what happens now. You see how they kind of just pushed out and down? Well, that's the awesomeness of what is auto-animate, because it's going to look at exactly where things were, like where this stuff is, where this is, and where this is. And then it's going to create a seamless transition or an animation based on where they're going to and the properties that have been applied to them in the destination artboard right here. So that's really cool and allows you to create these interesting sorts of animations, of course. The next thing we can do is let's create, let's see here. Yeah, let's do an overlay here. So let's go back to design. And we're going to start on the very upper left and right corner to consume the whole screen essentially. And we're going to create like a darker overlay and then take the opacity down, maybe right around here. All right. And right now we're going to, by the way, we can also, because we know our artboard doesn't need to be this big, we could just kind of push this up. All right. So then what we'll do is we're going to duplicate this artboard. And actually, before we duplicate this, we're going to duplicate it, but let's get the whole design up here first. I'm going to create kind of like a video player in the middle. So if we come out here right in the middle with the rectangle tool selected, we'll hold Alt, left click, drag out. Kind of just like an embedded video player, or it could be like a YouTube thumbnail or something like that. We'll go ahead and make this darker. Now, of course, I'm not going to put an actual video in here or anything like that. There's some plugins that I believe can allow you to actually put videos, but that's for a different topic and different time. Let's just create a rectangle. By the way, I should have used the polygon tool for that. No big deal. Actually, yeah, let us use that because that wasn't a very good. There we go. So Shift Alt. You can hold Shift to rotate while rotating to get us to a 90-degree angle. All right, that looks pretty good. And of course, you could take this further and you can get a little bit more elaborate if you duplicate that element and then, you know, make this a little bit darker. You know, put another play icon here, down here for your controls. And then you could just, you know, you could keep on really just adding to it as much as you wish. For now, we're going to say this is good just to demonstrate what would happen when somebody clicks that link. So now I can take all these layers holding Shift and then group them up, Control G. And then we'll duplicate this. And what we'll do is we'll take this and we'll push it up a little bit and then hide it. We'll also take this overlay right there and we'll drop that all the way down for the opacity. So then we go back to prototype. We're going to create a connect. We click on the actual artboard and then we drag this little thing on the right to the next artboard, and it will be auto-animate, but the trigger this time instead of tap is going to be time. And then for the delay, we'll put 0 seconds because we want this to happen instantaneously. So once the animation here is done where everything moves out, then this will come in. So now let's go ahead and select our original artboard, hit play, click this, and look at that. Very cool. So let me show you a couple other things about these properties here, which are really cool. So that duration, this is going at 1/3 of a second, so 0.3 seconds. It's going quite fast. If we turn this up, you'll see that it actually, if we hit play, notice it's starting here because we have this artboard selected. If we hit our keyboard back key, we can cycle through the different artboards essentially that are a part of this flow. So if I go back here and click watch a video, that's a little bit better. I think it's that animation's better. There's a lot of different types of there's several different types of easings. Like if we choose bounce, watch what it does to the animation. So it makes it bounce. Let's watch that from the start. So it's really cool. You know, sometimes you can use the wrong easings. That one doesn't really make sense. So ease in and out is always a nice one to use. It'll start slow, start slow, and then in the middle it's fast, and then it ends up slow as well. So ease in, out. But yeah, very cool stuff either way. So now let's also create another page. And another page, for instance, what happens when somebody clicks on try for free, this little this primary call to action. And I'll show you another way to create an interesting sort of, I guess you could say, animation, like for a loading graphic, like assuming something downloads when somebody clicks on try for free. So what's really cool is we can reuse these artboards in these different manners. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So if we take this try for free, we'll push this over to the same artboard. It's going to remember the previous settings that we used, which is okay. But if we click on this one beneath it, we'll see it's a ease out 0.3 seconds. So we can do the same thing, 0.3 seconds, ease out. All right. So now when somebody clicks on this, it's going to have the same effect. Notice, however, though, it ends up going to this one. Like when somebody clicks try for free, it shouldn't, forward over to that element. If you want to have like the same sort of animation occur for two different buttons that you click, we can just duplicate that original. And what we can then do is take this and we can separate this connection just by removing it like that, just left clicking it, and then we'll just drag it to this one. And then for this one, we'll take this connection off. All right, so now if we click this, hit try for free, now nothing happens because it doesn't go anywhere. So now what we can do is we'll go ahead and create, we'll just duplicate this. Let's push this down a little bit. Actually, instead of duplicating it, what we can do is design what we want to be there first. And we're going to create just a real simple page. In fact, we're going to copy, let's see here, this, and that's about it. By the way, we don't need this hidden graphic right there. All right, so we're going to paste that in, and this time they're both going to be centered. And we want to make sure that whatever they are, they're centered. There we go, right there. And we're going to put 1 moment while your download begins. Hold Alt and drag out so it's a little bit larger. It's about to get exciting or something, I don't know. And then we'll have a little loading graphic that animates indefinitely or infinitely. So to do that, we're just going to create a couple little circles, really. So Shift Alt, drag out, we'll make it our primary blue color. Duplicate it. All right, we'll take both. Control D to duplicate those. Hold Shift, and then create kind of like this this situation right here. And then we'll select all four and hit Control G to group them. So now, I would say also we'll take all these and we'll center them as well vertically within the available container. Right around there looks good. Okay, so now what we'll do is actually, let's go ahead and hide this too initially. There we go. So we'll duplicate this. We're going to bring this back. All right, and over here, we're going to make this fall down and in, so we'll hide it. And so let's just see what that looks like for now. Go back to Prototype tab and click this. This is going to be time with a 0-second delay, maybe 0.8 seconds, ease in and out. We'll hit play. Let's go back. Where's the home page? There we are. Try for free. All right. So we want this little graphic here to spin while we're waiting, essentially. So we'll go ahead and duplicate this, and we'll go to Design, and then we'll make this spin, essentially. We can make it go pretty much all the way around, and notice. Now, what's going to happen if we put -360? Is it actually going to animate? Well, first we have to go to Prototype, and we will drag this over. And we're at 0.8 seconds, ease in, out. Let's change this to none. The easing might make it look weird. Actually, let's leave it there and see what happens. And then we'll also come back here and drag this artboard over to it. And that way it's going to go back and forth between these. So coming back here to our home. And by the way, you want to click on this little home icon and notice how it says flow 1. You can have multiple what are called flows. We'll just call this main. Let's hit play. We'll click try for free. All right, it's a little bit strange because it's starting out like that. All right, I know why. It's because our easing. Is it because our easing? Ease in and out, 0.8 seconds. Easing's none. So let's do ease in out. That it was looking a little bit strange like that. So let's hit play here. All right, so that's actually pretty cool. I like that. So obviously in a real world scenario, like a download pop-up, depending on your browser, would pop up, and this is what a user would see. Now, of course, you would also want to take your home features, pricing, contact, all that, and start hooking those up all to your different artboards that you create. And so that's how you use the prototype feature. Of course, there's a lot of other different tiny features in there, a lot of other details, but I think those are the main parts that are worth pointing out. Now, one question you might have is, all right, so we created the desktop version of our site, at least the home page and a couple other sub pages. You would obviously need to do more work with more pages like the features page and the pricings page. But really, everything I taught you would give you the ability to create those pages on your own. Your question might be though, we did the desktop, so how do we show and take this design and make it work or present it in the context of what it would look like on a smartphone or a tablet or whatever? All right, I'm gonna show you how to do this home page here on a smartphone view. All right, so what we'll do is I'm going to go back to our design tab in the artboard tool, and let's just say we're just gonna use an iPhone 11, like the latest one. We're gonna put it right here just so that I can see it along with what's here as well. All right, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna start duplicating things and dragging them over. So before I do that though, I'm gonna select the artboard itself and give it the same background color right here with the eyedrop tool or the color picker. And then we're going to make some decisions. So this is where having an understanding of, how a navigation, for instance, like we're about to deal with, should alter or should behave on different devices helps. So if we look at this, we don't have much width to work with, obviously, because if we compare a phone that you're able to hold in your hand to a big desktop, monitor, there's a lot less space. So we have to make certain adaptations based on the space that we have available to us. So if we were to take this whole element right there, let's go to right here, we can see it's a component, like a header component, and we come over here and just paste it, we have some issues, clearly, because, oh, I thought that was all grouped up. Well, either way, the situation is going to be such that we're not going to be able to put all those links. We're not going to have enough room to make them visible. So one thing we do want though is the logo. People need to be able to see the logo. So if I place this here, it's really kind of large, so we're going to make it smaller, like 14 or so. Make sure we have good white space from the top and left. And then we can also get a hamburger menu so that when somebody clicks on it, it will show these 5 different links, like right here, 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 here. And by the way, you would have enough space, by the way, and maybe we'll do that, to also put the Go Premium button next to the hamburger menu. So if you recall, we used a plugin, wrong button, a plugin called, is it Icons for Design? Yes. So if I type in menu, we can just click this, and now we have a quick, what's called a hamburger menu. That's, a pretty common pattern. So if I hold Shift and Alt and scale that down, we can make adjustments to it, kind of like that. Maybe make this 2. All right, so we're gonna put this into position. All right, so that's looking pretty good there. And like I said, we could also grab this Go Premium component right here. This is obviously it gets scaled down a lot. So if we try like 14, might even have to go a little bit smaller than that. We can probably also adjust the padding on it. So if we come out here, this is at 9. This is at what, 24. So we're going to change this to 10. It's almost, in my opinion, like let's hit play here. If we select the artboard, we can hit play. Just to see, because this is going to look, it's not too bad, but honestly, I think it clutters up everything. So I'm going to opt to not include that. And by the way, you want to make sure when you move this around, you get these, that this is on the same, centered, because if we move this around, we'll see, there we go. That's at the center of here. So you definitely want to make sure you do that sort of thing. Next up, we would have after that is these two columns here. All right, so we have this column and then this right here. Which one does it make sense to put on top? Well, that would be a great use case for using stacks, so you can experiment with them and then have like usability tests and all that. But for me, I'm gonna take this, copy that, paste it in here. We'll shrink things down. Now remember, your strokes don't get shrunk when you shrink them. That sounds like a tongue twister right there. Let's try like 2 here. We can adjust this down to like 2, and this one as well. And perhaps you could create some sort of animation when it's realized in the front end portion, or you can use auto-animate to even do the same thing. Okay, we'll say that's good right there. And then we need to take all this stuff and put it there as well. So this type is way too large and it's not really situated correctly, so we have to work with each one of these. So I'm gonna right click and ungroup these. So now I can select them individually without having to click into them. Then I'm gonna center it, and that's a common pattern as well, is to center your text. Not all text, but some text, like especially titles and stuff, centering it when you're on a phone. We can really scale this down. Try 14 there. We're going to push this all the way to the left, push this all the way here to the right side, scale it down. You still want it to be bigger. You still want to maintain that good visual hierarchy. All right. And we can move these things around here in a second. And we'll scale this down. And you can see it's a pretty quick process just to translate it real quickly. So now we'll take all this. We can also scale this down. This needs to be scaled down just a bit. I'm going to put these all and situate them a little bit better. So now I take this, Control G, group it up. We have this group as well. And now we can take both of those, right click and make it into a component, and then stack it. So now we can double click this, and you see which one makes the most sense. You can easily create that as an adjustment. And of course, when you double click into these, we can adjust the white space between them. All right, so for me, I'm going to say that's looking pretty good there as the initial screen of what it would look like when somebody's on a smartphone right here. You can also create another artboard where you show what happens when somebody clicks on this hamburger menu, and you can have like a little drawer kind of slide out with those 5 different links. You could completely do that as well. Let's continue on though, because it makes sense for me to show you a little bit more about how you translate a design. So Sometimes when it comes to creating like a mobile version of a desktop, or vice versa, if you start from a mobile version and then you try to get to a full desktop, it's called progressive enhancement. So we're working opposite of that right now. We're not enhancing it, we're kind of dehancing. Is that actually a word? I don't know. Because we may not have enough room to show like these little graphics right here and all this. So we have to make certain decisions that are relevant based on the device that's going to be viewing everything. So we're going to copy this and this. So we have two different layers selected. We're going to select on here and then paste those in over here. Now, I'm going to just drag this in a bit. Select just this one. There we go. Now we have an issue. These are kind of extending outside. So we can just double click into here. And by the way, we can also stand to make these smaller. Like 18 would work or so. Now if we double click both of these, we can scale these down as well. And because it's in a repeatable group, it's going to change all of them. All right, so now if I double click into this, move this over a little bit because we don't need that much white space. And then we can also change the line height. There we go. This one, announcements is too close to that area, so to the edge of the browser, so I don't like that. And there we go. I mean, you could literally create something that is that simple. Let me go ahead and drag this back in. There we go. And this would be completely fine. Like, we don't have to include all of this stuff here. And you could probably figure out a way to do it, but just to keep things simple, this is completely fine. We can move this up, maybe just underneath the viewport right here. There we go. And then you keep on doing the same thing. So let's do one more section, this one, and then we'll wrap things up. So now we have this section right here. And I'm pasting it. We'll go ahead and extend this down. All right. And now we'll take this. All right. So we have to ask ourselves, you know, do we want to keep the same idea where a person can swipe left, you know, and right to view more? Or maybe do you want to do a vertical one where they can scroll up and down? That's completely your decision. What we can do is just kind of start here in the middle. We do have to make some adjustments, and inside of this repeatable group, it is an actual repeated grid. So that means we can make a change to one and it will make a change to all. So for instance, we can drag this in like that. And yeah, I think I'm pretty much happy with this, although I would change this, maybe decrease its size a little bit. You know what's interesting though, it wasn't making the change across all of those. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take off the fact that it's a repeated scroll group, and then I'm going to right click and I'm going to ungroup the grid. Now something interesting happens, and this is something you need to be aware of. If you have elements that are completely outside of any of the artboard, they're not going to show up as being in your artboard layers. So let me show you what I mean. If we click inside of this right here and we go back to our layers, we'll see that we have, it's showing us all of our various artboards, like iPhone X right here. So if we click outside of it, you're going to see that these don't really have any artboards that they're associated with. They're not inside of any artboards. That's something to be aware of. All it takes is for a part of it to be, And then all of a sudden it's going to be thrust into that particular artboard, if that makes sense. So I'm going to delete all these. And then what we can do at this point, I can also, let's see here, I'm going to ungroup component. That way it's no longer its own component. I don't want it to affect anything else. And then what we'll do is hit repeat grid. Now we have that new design. We'll have it kind of extend out a few. And we could stand to make this even a little bit less width. That way, we can give a visual indicator that they can view more of these by swiping left or right. Or when it's realized in the front-end development process, you can make them automatically kind of scroll. All right, so I'm happy with that. And then now at this point, we can make a horizontal scroll group. Right here is exactly where I would want it to be. So now let's just push this up. We'll go ahead and hit play. We'll scroll down. And there we go. All right, very awesome. So this is the process of what I would say is UI, UX design here within, or a part of UX design at least, here within Adobe XD. So yeah, I hope you learned a lot here. We covered a ton of different features. And I would say just learning the features that I taught in this crash course, those alone will take you very far. But again, when it comes to being able to design things that look great and work well, it's less to do with knowing how to use the application, and that's like 10% of the battle. Most of it has to do with developing that eye for design, which is where my site comes in, DesignCourse.com. That's where I'm really focusing on teaching as much as possible. All right, I hope you enjoyed that and learned a lot. As always, make sure to subscribe. Check out DesignCourse.com. Enter your email if it hasn't been launched yet based on when you're watching this video, and I'll see you soon. All right, goodbye.